elevating the discussion while talking about the things that matter most. You're listening to Society and the State, Life, Liberty, and Your Pursuit of Happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Hey, welcome to Society and the State. Brian Hyde here along with Connor Boyack. And we're going to talk about everybody's favorite four-letter word today, free. Woohoo! Well, you would think that it's everybody's favorite four-letter word, considering how many people running for office tend to throw that word around as a means of leveraging people's support. Bernie Sanders probably most likely comes to mind, and nowhere does this seem to hit a better note within his prospective voters than when he talks about free college. What's your take, Connor, when you hear free college?
Well, I saw just the other day another presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, saying, I plan to spend $100 billion to help more black people get home ownership and have reparations for the past. And it's just amazing the degree to which central planners are willing to spend your and my hard-earned money, right? It's just like it's zeros at this point. Who cares where the decimal point is? I'll just shift it one place to the right, and that'll solve the problem. And I feel like this idea of free college is the same thing. It's central planning under this notion that everyone should go to college. So maybe let me ask you this, Brian. Should everyone go to college?
There's a time when I would have said absolutely. That is the ideal. But then I started hanging around with you and being exposed to other guys like Isaac Morehouse and Zach Slayback and others. And I'm not so convinced that college is for everybody. And in fact, historically, it wasn't for everybody.
People led very fulfilling and successful careers and lives absent this higher education institution. And I think you would agree, Brian, that while that may have been true of yesteryear, I would posit that it's especially true of our day, where not only do you have universities putting all their content online for free, where you can go listen and watch as if you're sitting in the classroom, but you have all these other companies and programs and organizations out there creating opportunities for people to learn, achieve mastery in a specific trade or skill without having to sit in a classroom, acquiring all that debt, reading out of textbooks, rather than embracing the experience of learning as you go in the world. Kind of the apprenticeship model, right? Is like you're guided by someone who's pointing you in the right direction. You're making little mistakes, but how better to learn than to internalize that yourself rather than reading in a textbook about someone else making a mistake.
Well, and I think a lot of people like to follow the script. I have a son who just recently returned home from serving a mission for our church. And so now the door's open in front of him. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And, there's a side of the family that's very, well, you go to college and you get that degree and you get a good job. And I'm kind of the other side of the coin, saying, think about what you want to do with your life. Mm-hmm. Maybe college is the answer, but then again, maybe it isn't. And I say that based on, I saw something that Isaac Morehouse from Praxis posted the other day on Facebook. He's got a lot of very bright young people who are not going through the college route, that are participating in his Crash program. Mm-hmm. And he said the commonalities that he sees between them, they all had a lawn mowing business or something like that. They worked for Chick-fil-A. They blogged or otherwise. They started creating content. But the key is that, like you were saying, they started getting experience on their own rather than sitting in a classroom to get a piece of paper so that could signal to the world, now I'm ready to hire.
Isaac was actually our second guest on this podcast. So if you go to societyandthestate.com/2, you can listen to that interview with Isaac. We also just did the episode about my new book, Skip College. Isaac was actually a contributor to one of the chapters in that book. And so you can scroll down a couple episodes in your podcast app and you'll find that episode if you didn't catch it. But the thing that worries me about free college is that when the government makes something quote unquote free, what it really is a distortion in the marketplace. Those resources would have been allocated differently and more efficiently by the pricing system, using price signals where people would understand, well, wait a minute, I can earn X in this profession, but only Y in this other profession. I'm going to go do X. Seeing that price information, and that's actually what it is. Prices are information for us to make informed consumer decisions. And so when the government comes in and distorts that by saying that the price of going to college is now zero, what they don't really show you is the hidden opportunity costs, right? They don't show you what you otherwise would be making. They don't show you what you would have missed out on. They don't show you in true Bastiat form of that which is not seen, they don't show you the economic effect of forcing you and I, who have already gone through that phase of our lives, to subsidize and pay for that free college. I would rather for my kids give them 20, 30 grand to start a business and learn from success or failure or hard work or whatever's going to be involved in that, rather than paying for their college tuition, you know? And so my concern with the free college approach is not that college is evil or that it's wrong or it's horrible. I think there are many aspects where that's partially true. My problem is that it completely distorts market signals, and because you lower the price, the perceived price of college, and people say, ooh, it's free, you're incentivizing more and more of them to go into that funnel and go on to that conveyor belt. And by so doing, you are pushing people into an educational system that otherwise wouldn't have gone there, which means colleges now who benefit from the government paying the bill are going to increase their price. I saw a chart just the other day where it showed CPI, inflation, from the early 70s to today. That's about 4 decades. And inflation was about 200% total between that time, right? The cost of tuition was, I think, over 600%.
Wow.
And so that just shows that and we see it in healthcare, right? All these industries where the government gets involved, those who are offering their products or services will raise their prices. I mean, let's be honest. If someone comes to me and I know they're very wealthy and they're asking me to provide them a bid for a service that I'm going to render, I'm probably going to add another zero on top of that because I know they can pay it. Whereas if someone comes to me and I know their condition or I don't know their condition, and you know they're probably just middle class, and I want their business, I'm going to offer them a competitive price because I want them to retain my services. But when people know that the government is the backstop, right, the prices go up, I think the quality goes down, and now you have all these people being trapped in the system where folks like Mike Rowe often talk about what's happening to the trades. You know, you got plumbers out there making 150 grand without having to go to college, but we need more of them. That is my worry, is that the overall marketplace is disadvantaged because of this artificial subsidy.
There's another aspect that I was just reading about recently, and that is when people go to college, just because, well, you go to college to get the degree, and all they're concerned about is getting that piece of paper. They're really not concerned with what they're learning. And this was in the context of an article about why are there so many online businesses now offering to write your papers or your thesis for you for pay. And it's very elaborate now. It's very anonymous. They do it. It's a quality job. So it's not just, we give the same one to everyone. No, we'll custom do it for you. And it costs, somewhere from a couple $100 to maybe a couple $1,000. But the whole reason people are doing that is because they don't really care about what they're learning. I just want the piece of paper. So they're there for the wrong reason, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I
think that's a very valid point. And so now the government, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, everyone else is pouring gasoline on this fire that we have going on, exacerbating the very problem we have. It's like they're unable to recognize or unwilling to even consider that there's this more fundamental underlying problem in the system. And I think it's controversial to say, this is why I asked you the question, Brian, not everyone needs to go to college. We've held up the higher education institution, the college industrial complex, as like the gatekeepers of success. I think the scales are falling off of people's eyes. I'm actually very excited because I see all these alternative pathways being created now. And I am hopeful that, that competition is going to force universities into recognizing that costs can't keep ballooning. They've got to bring them down.
You had mentioned, plumbers. If people really knew what plumbers made, they'd probably treat them with a lot more respect. And you would never hear somebody say, see, son, that's why you go to college, so you don't have to do what he's doing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that plumber makes 3 times as much as you do. And yeah, it's a manual trade. Yeah, his hands get dirty in the course of a day's work, but he keeps the world running.
And he'll probably pay off his house like 2 or 3 times as quick, right? He doesn't have all the school debt probably. And that is interesting, kind of the cultural approach. I think you're right. Growing up, you and I, the inference was, if you want to be successful, you go to college. And, we have all the big like tech stories where the Mark Zuckerberg and stuff, which I think have helped raise the awareness that, look, you can be successful and be a dropout. I'm actually amazed, Brian, since I started working on this Skip College book and people have known that I've been doing this, I get all these people messaging me like, yeah, I dropped out or I never went. I never would have thought that at all. given how successful they are. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. I have a question, Brian. I think it's odd that conservatives have reacted so strongly against the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warren proposals and others where college should be free. Sometimes they focus just on community college. Sometimes it's much broader than that. We see now this idea of debt forgiveness, right, for everyone who's already been to college.
Talk about incentive to take out all the loans you can.
Right. Like, get me into Harvard right now, right? $250,000 in debt. So we see just the visceral backlash to this idea. Why do you suppose we don't see that same backlash to K through 12 being subsidized? It seems to me that if we want to be consistent and be concerned about the distortions of the government into education, the manipulated market incentives that we talked about, the lower quality, the inflated costs, all these problems, am I wrong in thinking that they also apply to K through 12 education as well?
Well, you see, Connor, there's socialism and then there's Republican socialism. One of these is acceptable. No, it's a very real blind spot, and I agree with you that ostensibly the reason they're against Bernie Sanders is, well, that's just pure socialism. You're just trying to do stuff with other people's money. But there's a really interesting blind spot in a lot of members of the GOP who don't seem to have any problem with it as long as it's, something that they're in control of.
Yeah, I think that's right. You see the Obamacare is evil, but throughout the decades, the Republican parties, like including Mitt Romney and others, Orrin Hatch, these guys have advocated very big Obamacare-like plans that did not have the same visceral response. It makes me think that, what's going to happen is, sure, Bernie Sanders won't succeed, but you're going to get some Republican who's going to say, I'm a compassionate conservative, and we need to give a leg up to help our economy in the future succeed. So we're going to subsidize, they're going to wrap it in their Republican terms, and then we're going to get the same thing.
I think one of the best examples of that I can think of is something you and I see in our home state of Utah, and that's the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Yeah.
Where it's, I don't know any nice way to say it. Government is actively choosing winners and losers. And that's not the free market at work, folks.
But I think in that point, Brian, everyone is just looking out for themselves. Like, if my company can get a tax break, awesome. And I understand that perspective, right? You're a fiduciary. You have a fiduciary responsibility to your company. If you have a way to lower your tax burden and increase your profits, you got to take advantage of that. But people in those situations are not looking at kind of the broader system. They're not looking at the broader public policy to see how unhealthy that is if everyone is playing that game. I think it's that same way with, think of the recession and the government's manipulation of mortgages and home loans. And no one cared about the broader system. Everyone was in it for, my interest rate is low. And that's all they care about. And, again, rightly so. If you can get a low interest rate, that's in your best interest. But writ large, when everyone is doing that, it creates problems. Here's a quote from then Secretary of Education William Bennett. This was in 1987. So this is the federal government's guy over government education. He said this near prophetic observation that 30 plus years later we're looking at. He said, increases in financial aid in recent years have enabled colleges and universities blithely to raise their tuitions, confident that federal loan subsidies would help cushion the increase. It was happening back then, of course. It's happening more now. And with the proposals of some of the Bernies and the Elizabeths of the world, it's going to happen even more. And Brian, my concern with this free college idea is that it's very expensive, because free college is going to lead to increased tuition, which means that everyone for whom it's not free, who doesn't qualify for the subsidy, who's in maybe not a community college, but they're in a public university or private university, the entire system ends up inflating its costs and subsidizing the community colleges or subsidizing partial scholarships or whatever they end up doing just causes all the prices to go up, which exacerbates the student loan crisis, which fuels more of these central planning ideas that we just need to throw money at it and debt forgiveness and everything else. It's a vicious cycle to the bottom, and I'm worried that too few people see that.
There's also the aspect that nothing comes to you via the government without strings attached, even free education. So even if they're saying, Connor, you can just sign up for free and take the classes you want, get the degree that you want, I promise you there are stipulations. There are conditions upon which you can participate in that program.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised to see something along the lines of, well, we can provide this free education, but in return, we're going to need you to volunteer for, this many years of service or this government program or something like that. Essentially, they'll get themselves a very nice indentured labor force out of it. Or at least that's one possibility.
I think that's maybe the key takeaway is free college is very expensive. And like you say, if someone comes to you and offers you something for free, look at the fine print. read the size 4 font at the bottom of the 32-page contract, because free sounds good, but it's probably too good to be true. And even if it ends up being free for that individual, for all of us collectively as a whole who are forced to participate in that system, I think it's a big problem.
It sounds too good to be true. It's like the out-of-breath guy trying to sell you a TV on the street corner. Maybe you should look a little more closely.
All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We're going to be talking in the next one about war with Iran. And you got these John Boltons and Mike Pompeos and everyone agitating to get us into more war. We're going to talk with an expert and get to the bottom of it.
Thanks for listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.